Hello and welcome to our 5 minutes with Ekaterina war vlog about Dnipro, the central Ukraine. Today is the 15th of May, the National Embroidery Day, and this is one of the examples of Vyshyvanka, national embroidered shirt, which traditionally was worn by Ukrainian women. It's a little bit, usually it will be white minus black, and it's very important that Ukrainians all over the world, not only in Ukraine, they are wearing Vyshyvankas today. It's very important that we are keeping the traditions because the genocidal war is aimed into deleting our Ukrainian personality, our Ukrainian identity, and this opportunity to come together to show the solidarity and of course to wear Vyshyvankas is something that we highly value. And it's interesting that this tradition actually is not very old, the Vyshyvanka day tradition specifically, because you obviously can wear Vyshyvankas, and I remember at my childhood we wore them on the Independence Day, for example, or on other big holidays, but specifically the separate celebration and the separate Vyshyvanka Day is started to be widely celebrated in Ukrainian organizations after the invasion in 2014, after the annexation of Crimea, after the invasion of Russia. And that's the part of our identity, and it's the part of what it means to us to be Ukrainians, to be able to keep our traditions, to be able to show that we have our traditions, we are a separate nation, and the genocidal war will not reach its goal of removing Ukrainians from the list of the nationalities across the globe. So happy Vyshyvankas Day. I hope you will have the opportunity to see some people in embroidered shirts today. And maybe you also will buy a Vyshyvanka and wear it when we have big holidays in Ukraine, just as solidarity, as support. And also today is the important day in terms of what's happening in the international politics regarding Ukraine, because in Istanbul today there are the next negotiations with Russia, and Ukrainian president went there, but the Russian president, I already know that he didn't go there. I know that the leaders of other states will not come, and that will be the negotiations on the lower level. And Ukrainians do not believe that it will bring any peace. I have a colleague from abroad who was asking, do I think that the situation for Ukraine is turning to better? And that's not true. I actually think that it's turning to worse, because my idea is that Russians are already prepared for the summer campaign, and the summer campaign will happen regardless of any negotiations, and whatever talks are happening now, they mostly will be about the potential ceasefire in autumn rather than the change in the situation right now at the front line. The frontline situation is getting more intense because the trees are green, and when the trees are green, it's easier to hide, it's easier to invade, it's easier to start operations, and obviously Russians plan for it, and they're trying to fight. I already talked to some of the soldiers who are at the front line, and they said that Russians are trying to gain more positions because they keep in the places where they are, they're called positions, and Russians are trying to go to use this green forests or green trees to hide and get closer to our positions, and if they can, capture them. Of course, Ukrainian army also tries to do the same thing, and we are trying to gain some positions as well. But the problem is that without the international help and without the support in terms of weapons, we cannot do much, because if you think about Russia joining with China now, you saw the parade in Russia, you saw the Chinese leaders there, and joining with North Korea, joining with Iran, they produce weapons very effectively altogether, and they send these weapons, they send troops to Ukraine, and without the international help and without the same level of support in terms of weapons, Ukraine doesn't have much chances to withstand Russian aggression. And that means that actually not only Ukraine but Europe itself is becoming less safe and less secure, because we have the hybrid war now, and we have this attacks for the infrastructure. It's like internet attacks, but they can very easily to go outside, and each hacker attack it brings disruption, especially when we are talking about the critical infrastructure. And then we know that Russians are launching drones to survey the military objects across Europe, that they harm the cables, internet cables under the sea, and all these diversions, they are the parts of the testing the defensibilities of Europe. And I'm afraid that if Ukraine will stop now fighting, and if as a result of these negotiations we have the new ceasefire, for me it's like Minsk 4. You remember that Minsk agreements, they were ceasefire agreements, and they brought to the bigger war. So the Minsk 4 agreements, or Istanbul 1 agreements, they will also bring the temporary ceasefire, but that will bring Russia the opportunity to rearm itself and to start even bigger war in the European continent. So that's my fears, and that's what I'm thinking is might happen. We'll see. I hope for the better, and I hope I'm wrong here, but we all need to understand the danger, the potential danger of what is happening. And as for the situation on the ground, as I told you, the front line is very unstable. It's very intensive. It's intensifying. The military actions are intensifying. But in terms of attacks, in terms of bombings, we had a few weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks of more or less easy time, because before 3 weeks ago in Dnipro there was every other day of the massive bombing, every other day of the massive bombing, every day bombing. Kiev was bombed every day, and Kharkiv was bombed every day. And now these huge bombings, massive bombings come down. There are still sirens, there are still some bombings, but they're less intense, and I do not connect it to the negotiations. I just connect it to the exhaustion, because Russia had 2 weeks of very intense fires, super intense bombings, and they need some time to build new rockets, to build new weapons. So that's why we have relatively calm period. Rather than connecting it to negotiations, we need to connect it to the physical availability of the weapons. And as for the physical availability of weapons, I just would like to remind you that a lot of components that we find there, they are from Western companies, and the West is still selling Russians some components that they use in rockets. So they still sell a lot of equipment, the fabric for the uniform, for example, and some other things that you will use. They are so-called of the double meaning, or the that can be used. It means that they can be used both in military, and they can be used for civil activities, like fabric, for example. But obviously Russians do use Western produced things in order to continue the warfare, and that's something that we also need to think how to stop. So that's it. We have more frontline attacks. We have more fights. None of the ceasefires, or so-called ceasefires that were proclaimed on the 1st of May, on the 9th of May, on the Easter, whatever, they were not held at the front line itself. So the military actions at the front line, they were not stopping even for a single day. But we had the days without bombing. The 9th of May was the day without bombing. But again, it's very unclear if it's the intent, or to show the intent to show that, oh, we are celebrating something, we just need to stop fighting, or if it's just the logistical problem, and the need to just re-equip, and the need to help each other with the big missiles. And probably the last thing is the situation with food, and the situation with the electricity. Right now it's good, and it's good everywhere except at the front line itself, at the villages that are near the front line, where the logistically it's very difficult to bring things there. But there are enough of things in the supermarkets. The electricity blackouts sometimes happen. Yesterday it happened for a short period of time, but probably not connected to the specific problems with the energetics right now, but it will come towards the summer. So we have occasional blackouts, but we don't have many right now. And the prices are just skyrocketing. It's very difficult for people to work now, to find a job. a lot of businesses are closing, so the economical situation is getting worse and worse. So that's basically things that are happening on the ground, just to keep you in the loop, because I always talk about it in my videos. So that's the situation. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't stop talking to your friends. Don't stop spreading the information about what's happening in Ukraine. The more information, the more awareness people have, the better outcome will be in terms of decision making and in terms of understanding that Russia has to be stopped even if the cost is high. I wouldn't say for any cost, but even if the cost is high, we need to stop Russia now before it spreads, before the war spreads to other countries. That's it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you very soon under better circumstances. Goodbye for now.